Good.
Kevin O'Connell, kind enough to give us a couple minutes after practice this afternoon in some pretty significant heat, a little more moist than yesterday. Welcome back. We were just chatting, Justin Gard and I, about Taylor Swift, the phenomenon. She just added apparently a 6th show to SoFi, right?
Yep.
And she's giving as gifts $100,000 each to each of the drivers
of the semis
for the tour.
Oh my goodness!
So she's generous, but she's doing apparently pretty good. And she apparently, her fans caused an earthquake in Seattle, 2.3 on the Richter scale. Unbelievable. That's impact, Coach. That's big time impact.
I was a little disappointed to miss the home show here in the Twin Cities over at U.S. Bank.
Good point.
I was that almost made our family alter our summer plans a little bit, but just
you're never going to get it back, Coach.
No,
that's exactly
right. You're never
right.
going to get it back.
That's
so
exactly
I
right.
don't want to make you feel bad.
So, over the course of the off, there is no such thing I know as an off season anymore in football, if there ever was. But what's the closest you get to getting away from it, and what do you do, or what do you try to do to freshen?
Yeah, for me personally, there really is no off-season, postseason, and especially last year, unique circumstances with some interviews at some certain coaching positions, and immediately jumping into the roster and really knowing that the draft is on its way. I have a role and responsibility for with Kwesi to help with the evaluation process, not only in the draft but free agency, and then we're managing a lot of relationships amongst our own players as we kind of see how the puzzle pieces are going to fit. In this day and age of the salary cap and all the difficulty, I tell all our guys I wish we could keep every player of our 90-man roster year-round and then just keep adding to that. But unfortunately, the rules do not allow us. So my time really, Dan, is really in the summertime. Whether it's 2 or 3 weeks, I try, towards the end of June and into July before we report, I try to take about 3 weeks and just totally get away. It's all family time, whether it's, around the Twin Cities with my son Caden and his travel baseball team, or we did get away, to go back to California to see friends and family for a few days. But what we try to do is just, there's some time lost. And as much as I try to be everywhere at all times, like somehow my dad seemed to do for me, I don't do as great a job, and I tend to be at this place a lot. And, as much as we try to have our families around, this time of year is great when they're on the field. This is all making up for time lost during the season where we have to be totally committed and 100% all in at really every hour of the day, it feels like sometimes. But there's nothing I'd rather be doing, and I can do all those things, Dan, because of my wife, Leah, and just the amazing job she does. I could not do the job that she does. She could probably do mine pretty easily, and I'm aware of that, and I'm just very thankful and blessed for that. But I'm glad you asked about that, because very rarely do people do they really care about that side of it for us, and it does mean a lot to me.
Well, it's interesting just listening to you on this. There's a lot of guilt, I think, that coaches feel because
absolutely.
You almost know there'll probably be a day later where you go, God, I wish I could have done it differently. But it seems to be the nature of the job, and it's one of those trade-offs, right, that you sort of have to accept. But I can see it kind of tortures you along the way.
Yeah,
as well.
and you know what? It's the most random times too. Even when you're trying to get away. I can remember this summer, I woke up in the middle of the night and was thinking about a formation and a play, and it got, really true story. And sometimes I'll just grab my phone and shoot myself an email so I don't forget what I'm thinking, and then maybe that'll put me at ease, to go back to sleep, or when I'm, or at my kid's baseball game and I'm thinking about something. It's just, I'm still learning too. I'm still learning. I've been at this a year, and I got a lot of things to learn in regards to on the grass here in this building. But there's a phase of that I always have to be searching improvement in that area. Otherwise, I'm not doing what I should be doing with my family.
So when you're with your kid traveling baseball, are you one of those parents, or are you able to back off completely, or are you, yelling and screaming?
No.
And what's your approach?
Well, he started pitching, so every once in a while, I felt like Rocco, looking out at a tight strike zone on a Saturday morning down in, or out in Eden Prairie or wherever we were. I might chirp a little something. More sarcastic than anything tends to be my style, Dan. But I just love watching him, and he loves playing. And, he's met so many great teammates and just the community as we travel around. Go to some of these tournaments, and I can tell that there's a lot of love right now for the Minnesota Vikings because I end up spending a lot of time meeting fans and And the Minnesota, fans are so great. They know where Caden is, and when he's up pitching or he's hitting, nobody really comes and bothers me. And then the second he gets on base or the inning ends, people walk over. So I'm so thankful for. It's one of the coolest parts about this job for me. I've been in some great cities, but never ever with this kind of connection to our fan base. Wherever I go, I always love engaging with people because the passion is so real, and it's something I don't take for granted for a day, and I always enjoy those interactions because a lot of coaches around the league, they don't get that kind of daily kind of connection with the fans when they're out and about in the community. So it means the world to me, and I sure hope that continues.
So I got here in the fall of 1986. I've been here a while now, and I think you are starting to appreciate what I got pretty quick. Now, pro football is big a lot of places, obviously, but there is no team on the same plateau in this town, pro team, as the Vikings. When the Twins do well, they ascend. When other teams do well, they might ascend for a period of time, but it's different. It is definitely, there is a different place, a different emotional attachment. And what's interesting to me about it, and I don't know if you picked up on this, is there is a little love-hate, or there's a lot of baggage because, well, we haven't gotten to the Super Bowl in a long time, and when we did get to the Super Bowl back then, for the people old enough to remember, they haven't won it yet. So there is sort of this, I want to believe something's happening, and yet there's also this sort of, I'm waiting for the other shoe to drop, right? Do you sense some of that?
Well, I can, I do, and that goes with the passion, and I would rather have that and those feelings towards their team than not caring or not feeling like it's a year-round love of their team. And I do think it is born out of love of their team. And a lot of folks that I've met, their dad's dad was a Vikings fan, and then that's what they did. And now, I've seen, I remember seeing last year meeting a family, 3 generations of a family on the sideline before one of our games. I'll tell you this too. I remember it was during the offseason Saturday. The honey-do list came out. I went to Home Depot, and in a matter of about 20 minutes there, I'm not very familiar. So 20 minutes, I got about 2 things in 20 minutes trying to find everything. But in the process, I had about 3 or 4 folks come up to me and just shake my hand and say, "Before I die, Coach." And some of those folks were, they were a little older. So I was saying to myself, well, we better get back to work, Caden, because I don't know how much time we actually have. And there were some young folks, and I say, hey, I just hope you guys understand how much of an honor it is for me to be the coach of this team. Such unbelievable owners, and really what we get to do every day at this place. I'm just trying to get our players to understand, and I think they do, our culture and what we try to thrive for from our standard in our building. I want them to take that out into the community too and connect with our fans, and don't be afraid to tell them about it. Don't be afraid to be an example like you are in our building for our team, for our community. And I try to get these guys to understand that platform because I do think that's important. But everything you said is spot on. I feel it. I've had enough of examples of people coming up talking to me about various kicks over the years at random times.
Wide left.
I'm very much aware of the history that might be baggage, but I would tell people to just continue to trust that we're doing everything in our power to chase a world championship here, and it's incredibly hard to do. In his, my year, I was fortunate enough to talk to Bud a lot, and some of the dialogue we had was about how hard that is and the things he remembers or he did remember. I still keep him with me every day, like he's still going to show up at the building one day for lunch with me, and unfortunately, that's not going to be the case. So I think about it a lot, Dan. Sorry for the long answer.
No, that's okay. It's a good answer, and we all miss Bud. He was great on our show over the years. Just a great resource, and I know he was for you as well.
Yes.
Kevin O'Connell joining us after Vikings practice. You mentioned this is your second go-around now as a head coach. So I think question I've had for a while is, what is it that you think you know now about the job that despite your preparation and trying to talk to people, you couldn't possibly know until you went through it? Anything in particular stand out?
Oh, my goodness, there's so much. There's so much, Dan. I just think overall, surface level, just time management. You can read every book in the world. You can think you have a plan for it. But this job requires you to be pulled in a lot of different directions every day, and that's not always X's and O's. That's not always teaching technique and fundamentals. There's a lot of aspects of running a football team, especially the way we do it here.
Mm-hmm.
So, we're trying to build relationships. We're trying to make sure every single player on our team feels like not only I'm there for them, but off the field as well. Communication through tough times throughout their lives, then pouring into that. And then what does that mean when they leave our building? And it's just a full deal thing, and I refuse to do it any other way. So that requires me to constantly be learning. Throughout the season, Dan, I think I'll be better about just understanding, really where I can commit my time to in regards to our whole team, all three phases of our team, schematically there's always time for me to catch up late in the week to call the game.
Sure.
But I need to make sure that I am I need to be everywhere with our football team throughout the preparation of the game plan, why we're doing certain things, continue to express in great detail the why to our players in the team meeting setting, because I have learned if you're willing to do it and do it with true authenticity, and really try to – I've just learned you get what you emphasize with this group, and that's something that not all coaches can say, and I'm very, very lucky to have a group that I do.
The assumption historically is that a general manager and a head coach, by definition, have to think of their jobs differently, that the coach is about the now.
Yep.
And that the general manager is about, the now to an degree, but they got to think bigger picture. And I was thinking of that when I heard you say, we were playing it on the fan. You had the press conference Saturday, a briefing. I think it was Saturday.
Yep.
And somebody brought up Daniil, and you did the best I think you could under those conditions to try to navigate what then looked like maybe troubled waters. And what I got out of what you were saying is you were not pleading exactly, but you definitely were hoping that the thing was going to stay together and that you were going to find a way to keep him. And I would think, as a head coach, you're a better team, obviously, defensively with Daniil than without him. Then there's the other side of it, which is, but how many years are we going to commit? What's fair? So when you and Kwesi are talking about that stuff, is that how it works? Is that pretty much how it works, where you're lobbying more for the now and how do you guys work through the fact that you may have different ideas about where to go with this franchise?
Yeah, I think it's my responsibility, and I think he would probably say the same thing on his side. I think it's my responsibility to communicate what I think is best in the current time frame, but then also be willing to listen and understand and be educated on what that may look like. Many teams in this league have gone down the road of now, and then they wonder, why the total reset button needs to be pressed at some point. We have the ability to, in our opinion, to continue to chase a world championship competitively as we, reload and retool and just revamp this roster. As inevitably, players get older and this game takes its toll on players. There's young players that do or don't work out. We've got to find answers within our evaluation process, the player development phase with the players we currently have, and then continuing, in the case of Daniil, to find solutions that, sometimes it's hard to get to that point where both sides can deem it a win. I'm sure you've been in some negotiations in your career, and trying to find that place requires some tools, and those would be communication and making sure that never stops, finding a way to articulate points and the why behind what is your offer and what is their thought process, and then take all that information and just continue that dialogue. So I get a kick out of it because I know people probably laugh when I say Daniil and I are having daily dialogue. Well, Daniil and I are having daily dialogue. So it's not me lying. I'm not saying anything that is not true. And a lot of the things that I may articulate it in greater detail to Daniil than maybe at the podium. But, there's really no need to hide it if that's the solution that we want to get to. Now, that may not always happen.
Right.
And that's when the learning phase for me of understanding the here and now and the future has to come together in a way where ultimately my goal, Dan, is just to be prepared daily to coach this team to be at their best, whether that's a Tuesday in training camp, that's a Sunday in December, or hopefully, Sundays further on down the road than that. And I know that's what I signed up for.
How hard were you lobbying to get this thing done?
You know what? I just knew in my mind, I don't claim to be an expert on a lot of things when it comes to, I tell our players sometimes, you're lucky I don't, control the numbers, because I might move a decimal point or a comma and it might not be what you thought. But I just knew that there was a place we could get to, and I knew deep down that there was a desire by Daniil, and he knew I was 100% transparent with him of my, hopes for this whole situation, and that will always be the case. Some coaches might shy away from those conversations, but I feel like that's why I do it the way I do it every day. So those conversations can take place. They're authentic, they're real, and people can trust the things that I say in a business that sometimes that can be hard to do, and I just refuse to do it any other way.
Kevin O'Connell joining us. Just a couple more things for you. You mentioned learning, on the job and what you know now that you can't know until you go through it. You've now been around Kirk Cousins for a while.
Yep.
I assume, and you've been around quarterbacks for a while. Not all quarterbacks are wired the same. Their personalities are different. Part of your job, I know that you like to pride yourself on, is, okay, how do I best communicate with him, interact with him in a way that fits with who he is? How do I get the most out of that? What does he need from me? So are there specifics you can get to? What does Kirk Cousins need from you as you've discovered it the time you guys have been together?
Yeah, I think it's, a big thing for me is I have total and complete trust in him, his preparation, his willingness to be out there each and every Sunday, how he responds to adversity. He's a very, very competitive guy, and then ultimately he's very intelligent. So I can communicate with him in a way where I, almost as if sometimes I'm communicating with another coach or, a peer, where he feels like I've got total trust in him. I'm communicating in an authentic way. When we make mistakes, I make plenty of them. I own them in a way that he knows that that was totally 100% on me. And then all of a sudden, he does the same thing. And we work through things together. I think Kirk is, I think he continues to be a version of himself in this building currently that just I'm so proud of, and I'm proud of him. He's continuing to grow in our offense. And the X's and O's side, Dan, that will take care of itself and his role on our team. But he spoke to the team early on in training camp, and the message was unbelievable for a guy going into his 12th year. He does it on a daily basis. He sets a tone for a standard for our team, and a lot of our other leaders follow his leadership, and that makes me feel really, really good about where we're at.
Is it funky at all from your perspective? This is the first time he will be the starting quarterback for this team without a contract that goes beyond this season. And I know the logic for a lot of people is this is great because now he's working motivated in a new way to get the next deal. You could say, I guess, the same thing about Daniil. On the other hand, when it's the quarterback position, I always felt like, well, for you, it's like, well, no, you want your quarterback to feel like he's the guy and he's going to be our guy. So does this change for you any of the dynamics or in any way concern you that there's sort of this different role where Kirk doesn't know, right now at least, what's going to happen beyond this season? Yeah,
I think it all goes back to the healthy dialogue him and I had postseason, not only about how we played and how we're going to get better, but then throughout, some of the times where we were having discussions with his representatives, figuring out if a deal was there to be made, it got to the point when the conversation shifted to, hey, let's just do this, man. Let's just pour everything we have into this season together, and what an incredible opportunity that I have to coach him this year, and for him in year 2 of a system for really with the same play caller for the first time in a very long time for him.
Right.
Let's just maximize it. See what that does, see where we can take this thing with his leadership and him quarterbacking our team with some of the great players around him. And then ultimately we'll figure it out. One way or the other, we will figure it out. And whatever that means, this kind of falls in line with an earlier question of yours. My role is making sure he's at his best for 2023 and all the things that encompasses and how we help him do what is the most difficult job in professional sports. How do I play my role in that, from a play caller, from a motivator, to an understander of all of the things that he has to deal with day in and day out, and just help his job be as easy as I possibly can, which even if I'm able to do that as well as I can, he still has the hardest job in sports.
Very true. Josh Oliver, okay, this whole offseason there's been a lot of discussion about this is going to change everything, that this is an indicator that you guys identified a flaw that you think in this offense that you think was keeping you maybe from going to the next level. So is it that big? And I don't know if I don't want to get too deep in the X's and O's because I probably wouldn't even understand you, but what does he represent for you in that regard? Is it as simple as we had too many 2nd and 9s or 3rd and 8s when we ran early and we need to do something about that in order to further open up JJ in the passing game. What's this all about?
Yeah, you don't have to dive too far into the weeds of X's and O's to when you watch him walk by and see the size of this human being and the strength he has in his body, and he plays the tight end position. He can run routes. He can run vertically. But what we really established when we, identified Josh as the guy we wanted to bring in was that sixth member of really the offensive line, because outside of spreading people out like college offenses and RPOs and all those things, which there may be a time and a place for that, you still have to play traditional football and be efficient with that to ultimately marry the run and the pass and make the life easier on the offensive line and the quarterback when you can constantly put the defense in conflict. And part of that conflict is the physical toll of being worn down throughout the course of a football game. We can apply pressure, Dan, with all of our tools, tempo, making sure JJ's all over the building, running routes and attacking and being in attack mode. Where's the complementary players? Making sure TJ Hawkinson is wherever we need him to be to attack any weakness that we may see in a defense. But in the end, part of running the ball more efficiently is a mindset. And we felt like there was a player there that you pair him next to either Brian O'Neill or Christian Darisaw at tackle, and there's going to be some removal there, we call it, and make a dent in that front and try to get Alex Madison and the rest of our backs going forward, because I can tell you it's a heck of a lot easier to call plays on 2nd and 5 or less than 2nd and 10, 11, 12. We call them get back on track downs because you're off track. You're behind the chains, and ultimately you have to then overcome I'm trying to become a more analytical thinker percentage-wise, but those percentages shrink of your chance of failure if you keep those down and distance efficient.
Did you feel like you got worn down last year? Do you think that's one of the things that hurt you physically that did get in the way of, obviously you had a great regular season record, but I know the goal was to do stuff in the postseason too.
Yeah, I thought that there was a combination of things. Yes, we, and I had as big a hand in it as anybody as far as maybe the efficiency level week in and week out of our run game, but I thought it really set in when we started to have some injuries, and that can never, ever be an excuse. But we had kind of formed somewhat of an identity, and then there might be, a Garrett Bradbury, or there might be some movement inside, and we've got people stepping in some cases a second. I think about that Dallas game when CD had worked, to try to get back, and then we lose him that first drive, and then ultimately, a whole game plan really needed to be shifted on the fly, and I didn't do a good enough job, and I learned a lot that night. But ultimately what you're getting at is really accurate, and it's ultimately, sometimes it's not as hard as we make it out to be. Now our job as coaches is to grab that marker, get up on the board, and figure out angles and leverages and advantages for our players. But in the end, that physicality is a mindset. We're trying to establish it. I feel like we're already off to a little bit more physical camp. I think Brian Flores and his defense has a lot to do with that, which is also part of the big picture thinking, and why I tend to stay up thinking about this stuff a lot.
Last item, I promise. And you mentioned Flores. Last season defensively didn't go the way you guys obviously wanted it. The public perception is part of that was that philosophically it was a defense that was a bit too passive. Is that fair? Was that something you didn't expect from the beginning based on who you had there? And is that the whole impetus to the change that you made here, a guy who's perceived as a guy who's going to be more aggressive?
Yeah, I think it's it's a philosophy, and it's about getting alignment of philosophies, in how you play the game in all three phases. And I said this the other day, I just, and as far as being a player or coach, I have never felt such complete alignment in all three phases of our team. And when you feel that when we go against each other in practice, and it's hard for them. We're challenging them. We're causing them to have great communication and understanding of the scheme. And guess what? On our side, we have to be on top of every little detail, because the moment you're not, that pressure or even the illusion of pressure, we use that word a lot with our schemes. The illusion of things can cause maximum stress, not only for players, but I just know when you play against a defense like B-Flow's, the call sheet gets awful small because you don't want to expose yourself to too much risk in any one area. So you end up taking out a lot of the plays, and you just try to focus on things that have it's not about attacking anything. It's about managing the risk of when they attack you. And that's kind of what we try to do offensively. Matt Daniels has a lot of the same tricks and tools, on special teams. So that alignment is huge for me. And it's not that I didn't expect that to happen a year ago. It was just a learning experience for me of understanding myself as a play caller, myself making decisions situationally for our team, and then ultimately trying to figure out what would be the best thing for the Minnesota Vikings to win football games moving forward, and couldn't be happier with Flo.
All right. Well, I got about a million more questions, but I've kept you too long, so hopefully we can do it again somewhere down the road. We appreciate you coming to see us. Kevin O'Connell, the Vikings head coach, joining us. Thanks for the time, man.
I always appreciate it, man.
Thank you so much.